In the grand theater of entertainment, few rivalries have proven as enduring and captivating as the battle for dominance in the home console market. Yet what makes this particular competition so fascinating is not the victor who emerged triumphant through raw technological superiority, but rather the company that achieved the seemingly impossible. Nintendo captured the global gaming landscape not by matching the processing power of its competitors, but by deliberately choosing a different path entirely. The story begins with a simple yet profound question. What happens when a company with significantly less advanced hardware consistently outsells two of the world's most technologically formidable corporations? This is the paradox that has defined the modern console generation. A phenomenon that defies conventional wisdom about how markets are won and lost. Since the launch of the Nintendo Switch in 2017, the gaming world has witnessed an unprecedented shift in how success is measured, who defines victory, and what truly matters to the millions of players worldwide who choose their consoles based on criteria far more nuanced than specifications on a data sheet. The setting for this remarkable story spans the globe. From the bustling arcades and storefronts of Japan to the sprawling entertainment districts of North America and the passionate gaming communities across Europe, Nintendo's influence has grown steadily, creating pockets of enthusiastic adoption that competitors initially underestimated. What began as skepticism about a hybrid handheld and home console device gradually transformed into genuine market leadership, a transformation that left industry analysts scrambling to explain how a company was winning by refusing to play the game everyone else was playing. At the heart of this dominance lies a philosophy so deceptively simple that it was nearly overlooked by those accustomed to the traditional hierarchy of horsepower and graphical fidelity. Nintendo made a conscious decision to prioritize fun and unique experiences over raw computational power. While Sony poured billions into developing the PlayStation 5 with cutting-edge processors and graphics capabilities, and Microsoft invested heavily in the Xbox Series X with teraflops and technical specifications that looked impressive on marketing materials, Nintendo was quietly perfecting something far more elusive and valuable: the art of enjoyment itself. The timing of this strategy could not have been more significant. The Switch arrived at a moment when console gaming faced genuine uncertainty. The previous generation had seen the Wii U, Nintendo's console venture, stumble badly in the marketplace. The company faced questions about its relevance and future viability. Skeptics suggested that Nintendo's best days were behind it, that the company could not compete in a world where Microsoft and Sony were pushing hardware to its absolute limits. Yet Nintendo's leadership believed something different. They understood that the market was not monolithic, that consumers wanted more than just prettier graphics and faster loading times. The current console generation has become a masterclass in divergent strategies. The PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X represent the pinnacle of traditional console philosophy, powerful machines designed to deliver immersive, high-fidelity experiences with cutting-edge graphics that push the boundaries of what home entertainment systems can display. These devices position themselves as multimedia hubs designed for those who seek the absolute peak of technological achievement in gaming. The Nintendo Switch, by contrast, offers something fundamentally different: portability, accessibility, and a library of games that prioritize gameplay innovation over visual spectacle. What transforms this from mere market fact into a compelling narrative is the persistence of this pattern. Year after year, quarter after quarter, Nintendo has demonstrated that its approach resonates with an audience far broader than anyone initially predicted. The company has managed to appeal not just to hardcore gamers seeking innovation, but to casual players, families, and people who might not have considered themselves gamers at all. This expansion of the addressable market became Nintendo's true competitive advantage, one that competitors with far greater resources could not simply purchase or engineer their way toward. The dominance was not accidental, but rather the result of deliberate strategic choices that reflected a fundamentally different vision of what gaming could and should be. As we prepare to explore the deeper context and mechanisms behind this phenomenon, the question becomes increasingly clear. How did a company with inferior hardware manage to capture the hearts, minds, and gaming hours of millions worldwide? Before we continue with this investigation, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. To understand Nintendo's unprecedented market position, one must first examine the historical context that shaped the console industry and the expectations that Nintendo boldly defied. The console wars, as they came to be known, were traditionally fought on a battlefield defined by a single metric: raw processing power. For decades, manufacturers competed to build the fastest chips, the most advanced graphics processors, and the most impressive technical specifications. This arms race mentality became so ingrained in industry thinking that market dominance seemed inseparable from technological superiority. Sony's entry into the market with the original PlayStation in 1994 established a template that would persist for generations. The company positioned itself as the technological innovator, the corporation willing to invest massive capital in research and development to create machines that could deliver experiences competitors simply could not match. The PlayStation, followed by PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, and eventually PlayStation 5, each represented a genuine technological leap forward. With each iteration, Sony reinforced its brand identity as the purveyor of cutting-edge entertainment technology. The PlayStation became synonymous with high-fidelity gaming, with consumers understanding that choosing Sony meant choosing the most advanced hardware available. Microsoft, entering the console market later with the original Xbox in 2001, adopted a remarkably similar strategy. Rather than attempting to differentiate through unique experiences or innovative gameplay mechanics, Microsoft chose to compete directly on technological grounds. The Xbox, Xbox 360, Xbox One, and Xbox Series X all represented Microsoft's commitment to matching or exceeding Sony's technological capabilities. The company invested billions in developing powerful hardware and positioned itself as an alternative to Sony for those seeking the absolute pinnacle of gaming performance. This approach appealed to a specific demographic: hardcore gamers who valued graphical fidelity, processing speed, and the ability to play the latest blockbuster titles at maximum visual quality. Nintendo's historical trajectory followed a notably different path. The Nintendo 64 and GameCube were powerful machines for their respective generations, capable competitors in the technological arena. Yet even during these years, Nintendo maintained a different philosophical approach. The company invested in innovation beyond mere processing power. The N64's controller introduced the analog stick to mainstream gaming, fundamentally changing how players interacted with three-dimensional game worlds. The GameCube, while technologically respectable, prioritized unique gaming experiences through its distinctive controller design and exclusive software library. However, neither machine achieved the market dominance that would later define the Switch era. The real turning point came with the Wii, released in 2006. Here, Nintendo deliberately abandoned the technological arms race entirely. The Wii was not powerful compared to the PlayStation 3 or Xbox 360, yet it sold over 101 million units worldwide, fundamentally reshaping how the industry understood market success. The Wii's motion controls and focus on accessible, fun experiences attracted demographics that traditional consoles had overlooked: older adults, casual gamers, and families seeking entertainment activities. The Wii demonstrated conclusively that technological superiority was not the sole determinant of market success. The Wii U, however, tested this philosophy and proved that innovation in gameplay alone was insufficient if the overall execution failed. Despite its unique hybrid nature, the Wii U struggled significantly in the marketplace, selling only 13 million units compared to the Wii's overwhelming success. This period of relative failure was crucial. It forced Nintendo's leadership to reassess, to understand what had worked about the Wii and what had failed about the Wii U, and to develop a new approach that could capture lightning in a bottle once again. By 2017, when the Nintendo Switch arrived, the competitive landscape had shifted dramatically. Sony was preparing the PlayStation 5, a machine representing the absolute pinnacle of console hardware engineering. Microsoft was developing the Xbox Series X, equally impressive in its technical specifications and capabilities. Industry analysts, drawing from years of console war precedent, fully expected these technologically superior machines to dominate the next generation. The expectation seemed logical, almost inevitable. Yet Nintendo's hybrid handheld and docked console arrived with a fundamentally different value proposition, one that would prove far more compelling than any projection had anticipated. The Nintendo Switch's arrival marked a watershed moment, not because of its processing power, but because of what it fundamentally represented: a radical departure from how the industry had defined success. Where the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X embodied the culmination of decades-long commitment to raw technological prowess, the Switch embraced a deliberately different philosophy. Its processors were modest by contemporary standards. Its graphics capabilities lagged behind competitors by a significant margin. Yet these apparent limitations became irrelevant in the face of something far more valuable. A console designed around the principle that gameplay innovation and accessibility mattered more than pixel count or teraflop performance. Nintendo's strategic decision to prioritize unique mechanical innovation manifested most visibly in the Joy-Con controllers. These detachable wireless controllers introduced motion sensing capabilities that transformed how players could interact with games. They could be used individually or together, separated or attached to the console itself. This versatility enabled entirely new categories of gaming experiences that competitors' controllers could not replicate. Games like Ring Fit Adventure, 1-2 Switch, and Mario Party Superstars leveraged this hardware innovation to create genuinely novel forms of entertainment. The Joy-Cons became not merely input devices, but design tools that enabled experiences impossible on PlayStation or Xbox platforms. Beyond hardware innovation, Nintendo's first-party software strategy proved devastatingly effective. The company released an unprecedented cascade of beloved franchises with remarkable consistency and quality. The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild launched alongside the Switch itself, immediately establishing the console as a destination for transformative gaming experiences. Subsequently, Super Mario Odyssey, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, Animal Crossing, New Horizons, Super Mario 3D World, Splatoon 3, and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe created an ecosystem where nearly every major Nintendo franchise received a definitive entry. These were not merely good games, but landmark titles that defined their respective genres and garnered critical acclaim globally. The attach rate for Nintendo first-party software demonstrated this strategy's commercial viability. Market data revealed that Nintendo Switch owners purchased significantly more games per console than PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series X owners. This metric proved crucial because it meant the installed base of Switch consoles generated substantially higher revenue per unit than competitors' bases. A consumer purchasing a Switch also became highly likely to purchase multiple Nintendo titles, creating a virtuous cycle of hardware and software sales that traditional financial models suggested should favor the more powerful, more expensive consoles. Nintendo's strategy explicitly targeted audience expansion beyond the traditional hardcore gamer demographic, where Sony and Microsoft continued designing primarily for players seeking maximum graphical fidelity and competitive multiplayer performance. Nintendo deliberately courted families, casual players, and those seeking social gaming experiences. Animal Crossing: New Horizons, released during the global pandemic, became a cultural phenomenon precisely because it offered a relaxing, social-focused experience utterly removed from the competitive intensity that PlayStation and Xbox primarily marketed. Millions of players who would never describe themselves as gamers purchased a Switch specifically for this title, expanding Nintendo's addressable market in ways that proved economically decisive. The price point advantage further reinforced this strategy. The Nintendo Switch launched at $299, significantly less than the $499 PlayStation 5 and $499 Xbox Series X. This pricing created a lower barrier to entry, making the Switch accessible to broader demographics and households with budget constraints. The economics were paradoxical. The less technologically advanced console at the lower price point generated comparable or superior profitability through higher volume sales and superior software attach rates. Market data confirmed this strategic success across quantifiable metrics. In numerous quarters and calendar years since launch, the Nintendo Switch consistently outsold the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X in unit sales. By 2024, the Switch had surpassed 139 million units sold globally, making it one of the best-selling consoles in history. User engagement metrics showed Switch owners logged more average playtime than competitors' console owners. Financial performance data demonstrated Nintendo's gaming division maintained extraordinary profitability despite the smaller hardware installed base. Industry analysts increasingly acknowledged that Nintendo had fundamentally redefined competitive success in the console market. Phrases like blue ocean strategy entered discussions of Nintendo's approach, referencing the concept of creating uncontested market spaces rather than competing directly within existing competitive frameworks. The paradigm shift initiated by Nintendo's unprecedented market success triggered profound reverberations throughout the entire gaming industry, fundamentally challenging assumptions that had governed console competition for decades. The console war itself required redefinition. Traditional metrics of victory, raw computational power, graphical fidelity measured in teraflops, cutting-edge processing architecture suddenly seemed quaint and inadequate. The Switch's triumph demonstrated conclusively that market dominance could be achieved through entirely different parameters centered on player experience, accessibility, and emotional engagement rather than technical specifications alone. This redefinition created an uncomfortable reality for Sony and Microsoft. Both corporations possessed substantially greater financial resources than Nintendo. Both maintained larger research and development teams dedicated to hardware engineering. Both could theoretically invest more heavily in innovation than their smaller competitor. Yet despite these apparent advantages, neither could effectively replicate Nintendo's strategy. The fundamental challenge was not technological but cultural and structural. Sony and Microsoft had invested decades building elaborate ecosystems centered explicitly around high-fidelity gaming experiences. Their brand identities, their marketing narratives, their consumer expectations, all were inextricably linked to delivering cutting-edge graphical power and performance. For Sony to suddenly pivot toward Nintendo's philosophy would require abandoning the PlayStation's core identity. Imagine PlayStation marketing a console with deliberately modest processing power prioritized for creative gameplay innovation. The core audience that had built PlayStation's dominance through the PS2, PS3, and PS4 eras would perceive such a move as betrayal or dilution. The risk of alienating millions of existing PlayStation customers created structural resistance to strategic transformation. Microsoft faced analogous constraints. The Xbox's positioning as a premium entertainment device delivering maximum performance created similar lock-in effects that prevented easy repositioning toward Nintendo's lower power, experience-focused model. Additionally, the investment asymmetry worked against Nintendo's competitors. Sony and Microsoft had already committed billions to developing the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X architectures. These consoles represented the culmination of planning cycles spanning years and enormous capital expenditure. Abandoning this strategy mid-generation to chase Nintendo's approach would constitute a staggering waste of sunk costs. The rational business decision from their perspective was to continue developing their existing strategy more aggressively, doubling down on power, services, and ecosystem integration rather than fundamentally reimagining their approach. The developer landscape fragmented in response to Nintendo's success. Third-party software companies faced a genuine dilemma. Developing AAA titles optimized for PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X required budgets and technical resources that only large studios possessed. These games generated enormous revenue but appealed to relatively narrow player demographics. Conversely, the Nintendo Switch's massive installed base, approaching 140 million units, created an opportunity that could not be ignored. Yet developing games for the Switch's less powerful hardware required technical compromise or entirely different design philosophies. Publishers could develop for all three platforms, but this strategy increased development costs substantially. Alternatively, they could specialize, choosing to optimize for the high-power consoles, the Switch, or attempting an uncomfortable middle ground. Consumer behavior fundamentally shifted as a result. Rather than a single dominant console capturing the majority of the market, a more diversified ecosystem emerged where multiple platforms could coexist profitably in distinct niches. PlayStation 5 excelled for players prioritizing cutting-edge graphics and competitive multiplayer performance. Xbox Series X attracted audiences valuing performance and Microsoft's Game Pass service ecosystem. Nintendo Switch captured everyone else, which paradoxically represented a far larger demographic than traditional industry analysis had anticipated. Families purchased Switches. Casual players who would never buy PlayStation or Xbox chose the Switch. Hardcore gamers found themselves buying multiple consoles rather than choosing one. Market valuation trends reflected Nintendo's strategic triumph, while Sony and Microsoft remained enormous corporations with substantial market capitalizations. Nintendo's stock performance and profitability metrics impressed investors precisely because the company achieved extraordinary financial results with inferior hardware and substantially smaller development budgets. This success influenced broader investment trends, encouraging venture capitalists and corporate strategists across technology and entertainment sectors to reconsider whether traditional metrics of competition actually predicted market outcomes. The implications extended far beyond gaming hardware itself. Nintendo's success became studied as a business school case demonstrating how differentiation and strategic positioning could overcome apparent resource disadvantages. The future trajectory of Nintendo's dominance hinges on strategic decisions regarding its next-generation hardware. Speculation surrounding the rumored Switch successor, colloquially termed the Switch 2, centers on a fundamental question: will Nintendo maintain its proven philosophy of prioritizing innovative gameplay over raw processing power, or will it pursue a modest power upgrade while preserving its distinctive identity? Industry observers present compelling arguments for both approaches. A hardware refresh incorporating improved processing capabilities could address persistent limitations affecting third-party development and graphical fidelity expectations. The current Switch generation, launched in 2017, increasingly struggles to accommodate ambitious OLA titles without substantial optimization efforts. A successor maintaining philosophical consistency while delivering meaningful technical improvements might represent an elegant solution, allowing Nintendo to expand its developer ecosystem without abandoning the accessibility and innovation focus that define the Switch's extraordinary success. However, the cautionary lesson from previous Nintendo transitions emerges prominently in strategic discussions. The Wii U represented a paradigm shift toward tablet-integrated gaming that failed to capture imagination or sustained market interest. This historical cautionary tale suggests that incremental improvements alone prove insufficient when market leadership depends on capturing emotional engagement and cultural zeitgeist. Nintendo executives must navigate this tension carefully, ensuring that whatever hardware evolution emerges maintains the unexpected magic that transformed a technically modest device into a cultural phenomenon. Sony and Microsoft face equally consequential strategic crossroads. Both corporations continue pursuing power-centric strategies, exemplified by Sony's PS5 Pro and Microsoft's iterative Xbox refinements. These approaches represent logical extensions of established brand positioning, yet they implicitly concede that Nintendo has occupied an entirely different competitive space. The fundamental question confronting PlayStation and Xbox decision-makers becomes whether attempting to compete on Nintendo's terms represents viable strategy, or whether doubling down on existing differentiation proves more rational. Some industry analysts suggest that Sony and Microsoft have adopted an indirect response strategy through service-oriented approaches. PlayStation Plus and Xbox Game Pass represent attempts to create consumer lock-in through ecosystem value rather than hardware specifications alone. These services democratize access to extensive game libraries, potentially creating customer loyalty independent of any single console's technical capabilities. This represents a strategic acknowledgement that hardware alone no longer determines market dominance, even if traditional competitive metrics remain important for core audiences. The notion of replicating Nintendo's success through peripheral innovation or hardware experimentation has attracted speculation from technology strategists. Could PlayStation introduce a portable device competing directly with Switch? Could Xbox develop innovative controller peripherals or hybrid form factors that generate similar consumer enthusiasm? The uncomfortable reality confronting such proposals is that Nintendo's intellectual property ecosystem and decades of accumulated goodwill toward its beloved characters and franchises cannot be easily replicated through hardware alone. Mario, Zelda, Pokemon, and Animal Crossing represent cultural properties that command consumer preference independent of platform specifications. Broader industry trends reflect Nintendo's influence extending far beyond hardware competition. Game designers increasingly recognize that innovative mechanics and engaging experiences generate greater consumer enthusiasm than graphical marginal improvements. This philosophical shift, directly attributable to Nintendo's demonstrated market success, encourages development studios across the industry to prioritize creative gameplay innovation, accessibility design, and emotional resonance over technical achievement. The undeniable advantage that Nintendo has cultivated stems from elements deeply embedded in corporate structure and long-term vision. Nintendo's willingness to embrace unconventional hardware risks, its accumulated intellectual property portfolio, and its cultural identity as a purveyor of interactive joy rather than technical prowess create competitive moats that transcend simple resource advantages. These advantages developed through decades of strategic consistency and cultural positioning that cannot be manufactured through acquisitions or technological investments alone. Looking forward, The gaming industry appears positioned to embrace greater diversity in competitive approaches and platform philosophies. Rather than single hegemonic standards dictating console success, the market increasingly accommodates multiple coexisting ecosystems serving distinct consumer demographics and preferences. This fragmentation, fundamentally enabled by Nintendo's strategic breakthrough, represents perhaps the most significant industry transformation since the original console wars began decades ago. As the console market matures and competitive strategies continue evolving, the fundamental lesson Nintendo has demonstrated extends beyond gaming into broader business philosophy. The company's enduring dominance stems not from technological superiority, but from an unwavering commitment to understanding consumer desires at their most basic level, the human need for joy, connection, and shared experiences. This strategic orientation has proven remarkably resilient against competitors possessing substantially greater financial resources and technological capabilities. The core argument underpinning Nintendo's market position remains deceptively simple, yet profoundly consequential. Rather than competing directly on raw processing power, graphical fidelity, or technical specifications, Nintendo deliberately chose to differentiate through innovative gameplay mechanics and emotional resonance. The Nintendo Switch embodied this philosophy through its hybrid handheld docked architecture, motion-controlled Joy-Con controllers, an accessible first-party software lineup that appealed simultaneously to hardcore enthusiasts and casual players. This differentiation created what business strategists term a blue ocean, an entirely distinct competitive space where Nintendo faced no direct rivals. The case study of Nintendo's market dominance offers invaluable lessons extending far beyond the entertainment sector. In any competitive industry, victory through differentiation rather than direct confrontation frequently proves more sustainable than attempting to outmatch competitors on established metrics. Sony and Microsoft, despite possessing superior financial resources, advanced manufacturing capabilities, and established technological expertise, found themselves unable to replicate Nintendo's strategic breakthrough. Their organizational structures, consumer brand identities, and accumulated capital investments in high-fidelity gaming ecosystems created institutional constraints that rendered simple imitation impossible. This limitation of resources versus strategy illustrates a counterintuitive business principle. Abundance of capital and technical capability does not automatically translate into competitive advantage when strategic positioning operates on fundamentally different axes. PlayStation and Xbox executives, confronted with Nintendo's ascendant market share, faced genuine dilemmas that traditional resource mobilization could not resolve. Introducing lower specification hardware or downplaying graphical capabilities would alienate core consumer bases cultivated through decades of power-centric marketing. Conversely, accepting Nintendo's dominance in their market segment while maintaining distinct positioning represented uncomfortable acknowledgement that the console wars had transformed into something unrecognizable from their origins. The broader implications for gaming industry innovation have proven substantial and multifaceted. Game developers across studios increasingly recognize that mechanical innovation, accessibility design, and gameplay creativity generate more consumer enthusiasm than marginal improvements in rendering resolution or processing speed. This philosophical reorientation, directly attributable to Nintendo's demonstrated market success, has accelerated industry-wide trends toward diverse gameplay experiences, inclusive design principles, and emotional storytelling rather than technical showmanship alone. The future of gaming appears positioned to embrace heterogeneous platforms and competitive philosophies rather than consolidating around singular technical standards. Nintendo's breakthrough enabled this pluralistic ecosystem by demonstrating that multiple distinct approaches could simultaneously flourish in the same market. Consumers now possess genuine choices reflecting diverse preferences, those seeking cutting-edge graphical experiences, those valuing innovative gameplay mechanics, those prioritizing social connectivity, and those emphasizing accessibility and inclusive design all find representation in the current console landscape. The ultimate insight emerging from Nintendo's strategic dominance transcends gaming industry specifics. Market victory does not automatically belong to competitors possessing superior resources or more advanced technology. Strategic differentiation, cultural resonance, and genuine understanding of consumer desires often prove more decisive than raw capability metrics. Nintendo's intellectual property ecosystem, generations of beloved characters and franchises, combined with corporate culture emphasizing playfulness and innovation over technical prowess, created competitive advantages that cannot be manufactured through investment or acquisition alone. As the gaming industry continues evolving, the lessons from Nintendo's remarkable market dominance will likely influence strategic thinking across across entertainment, technology, and consumer product sectors. The company's success demonstrates that understanding what consumers genuinely desire, then delivering those experiences with excellence and consistency, ultimately matters far more than possessing the most advanced tools or largest development budgets. In the end, the console wars have evolved into a more nuanced competition where different players can simultaneously succeed by serving distinct consumer desires, and Nintendo's strategic foresight made that possibility reality.